And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. Now, this show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and writer and commentator John Gaunt. Before we get started though, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hello there, I'm Polly Middlehurst with your latest news and the top story. Downing Street has warned Moscow it will be punished with a package of sweeping measures if its troops enter Ukraine. It comes after the US and Russia held urgent talks in Geneva to ease tensions. The Kremlin has made a series of demands and is waiting for a written response. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says it's up to Russia to decide whether diplomacy or conflict prevails.
So that's the choice that Russia faces now. It can choose the path of diplomacy that can lead to peace and security, or the path that will lead only to conflict, severe consequences, and international condemnation. The United States and our allies and partners in Europe stand ready to meet Russia on either path, and we will continue to stand with Ukraine.
Well, earlier on today, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, called on Russia to desist and step back from Ukraine. Speaking in Australia, she said an invasion would lead to terrible quagmire and loss of life.
They claim they want stability while they work to threaten and destabilise others. We know what lies down that path and the terrible toll in lives lost and human suffering it brings. That's why we urge President Putin to desist and step back from Ukraine before he makes a massive strategic mistake.
Liz Truss speaking earlier. Well, in other news today, the Business Secretary has told GBNews claims of blackmail by Conservative whips over the distribution of public funds are ridiculous. Kwasi Kwarteng's comments follow reports that rebels are threatening to publish secret text messages and recordings from the Prime Minister's supporters. Boris Johnson says he's seen no evidence to support the claims.
All public spending goes through proper process. There's a proper official paper trail, if you like. There's a proper procedure through which public finance, taxpayers' money ultimately is allocated. So any idea that the Whip's office have this in their gift, I think should be challenged immediately. And clearly, if these allegations are true, that's a very, very serious allegation, and I'd want to see them properly investigated.
Kwasi Kwarteng speaking earlier. A senior Metropolitan Police officer has been jailed for 3 years for using hidden spy cameras to film women. Detective Inspector Neil Corbell booked models for photo shoots before planting gadgets in their rooms. The married father of 2 and former counter-terrorism officer was caught after one woman found a hidden camera in a digital clock. He pleaded guilty to 19 voyeurism offences last September. The 33-year-old man has been charged with murdering an 86-year-old and trying to kill her husband in Derbyshire. Vasile Kulea was arrested yesterday after Frida Walker was killed in the attack at her home on Saturday. Her 88-year-old husband, Ken, suffered life-threatening injuries and is still in hospital. Kulea from Nottinghamshire will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. More than 300 people have been rescued by the Italian Coast Guard off the island of Lampedusa. 2 patrol vessels saved the migrants who were crowded onto a 15-metre boat around 20 miles off the coast. The Coast Guard said the boat was carrying an excessive number of people and could have capsized if they hadn't intervened. Hospital patients in Norwich will be moved to a hotel in a bid to free up beds and ease pressure on the NHS. Up to 15 patients will receive care at a city centre hotel as part of a 3-month pilot scheme. It's going to target people who are ready to leave hospital but need extra care before they go home. COVID patients won't be involved. Entertainment news and tributes are being paid to US singer Meat Loaf, who's died at the age of 74. Soundtrack to most people's youth. His career, which spanned 6 decades, saw him sell over 100 million albums with hits like that, I'd Do Anything for You, and of course, Bat Out of Hell. He starred in 65 movies, including the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Wayne's World, to name but a couple. And one last piece of entertainment news. Adele has taken to Instagram to apologise to fans for postponing the start of her Las Vegas residency because her show isn't ready. The singer says her production team tried everything to put it together in time, but delivery delays and COVID infections in her team made it impossible. The show was due to open today and run most Fridays and Saturdays until April, but on Instagram she apologised to fans who'd travelled already to see her. You're with GB News. More coming soon. For now, let's get back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. Welcome aboard if you've just tuned in. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. So, finally, we have our politicians focused on the business of government. I know, amazing. Nadine Dorries is doing exactly what she's meant to be doing as a culture secretary. She talked about reducing the salaries of the big BBC stars like Gary Lineker. She's absolutely hit the right chord with the British public on that one. Why should we all face huge bills while still paying more for a BBC licence fee which supports his astronomical £1.3 million wage? Reduce it immediately, please. They even had the cheek to ask for an increase in the fee whilst we're all facing tax hikes and a cost of living crisis. I mean, it's stuff like that as much as I love the BBC, it demonstrates just how out of touch it is. But now Labour have taken on the mantle, haven't they? They're claiming that the government is using actually running the country as a distraction. And they want us to focus on Boris and Partygate. Interestingly, no one wants to focus on their own Partygates. Keir Starmer swerving scrutiny, claiming the event at a constituency office where they ordered a meal and were seen drinking was purely a work do, and refused to apologise as to how it might look. I frankly can't see much of a difference with what he did and what Boris did. And you know, you're really scraping the barrel when Dominic Cummings is seen as some sort of wise man soothsayer type character who we are to believe because he's apparently got nothing to lose, why would he lie? A disgruntled ex-employee who came out with the story about testing his eyes when it was thought that he had broken the rules. Let me see. Then you've got journalists like Beth Rigby questioning the Prime Minister about parties and asking him to resign. But wasn't she caught with her very good friend Kate Burley and suspended on full pay for having a party and breaking COVID rules? It's a bit rich calling for others to lose their job when you did something similar and kept yours. As soon as you scratch the surface of every Boris questioner or accuser, you find their copybook is also blotted. And it becomes well, what he did was worse. It's laughable. Now, of course, it's the turn of the young, new Tory MPs to take aim. They're claiming that they're being blackmailed and are prepared to provide evidence. Referred to as the pork pie plotters, or by some in the Cabinet, or by some in the Cabinet as attention-seeking school children, after their attempt to trigger a confidence vote in the Prime Minister hit a bump in the road following the defection of a Tory MP to Labour. They claim that whips have threatened to withdraw funding for their constituencies and that government aides have smeared them by releasing unsubstantiated claims about their drinking habits and personal lives in the press. Number 10, of course, have denied all these allegations. Talk about eating yourself from the inside out. I mean, really, do the Tories want to stay in power? Has anyone actually thought ahead? I mean, at this point, anyone with a grudge can say anything to try and take Boris down. I mean, it's a bit like one of those Rocky movies where they do the slow-mo. The more I think about it, the more I am fed up with this constant jostling for power. I just haven't got the stomach for it. How many Tory leaders are we on now? The Labour Party aren't much better on that score. I mean, none of them appear to be able to get their houses in order at all. I say, we the public get what we want. I actually like the fact that we have the government on the ropes. They'll do what we want to try and please us, so why don't we play the game? Don't let them off the hook by changing the leader now. They'll waste yet more time in deliberations and reorganisations. They'll lay the blame for all their dodgy policies on their predecessor, which would be Boris. If we can get rid of him, but they'll still carry on through and absolve themselves of all responsibility of the outcome. Do you know what? I actually don't care about all of this now. I mean, I'm sick of the he said, she said game. It's just ridiculous. And the outcome, if we dispose of Boris, is no better in my eyes. So this is all a waste of time. So let's have a look and talk about what's coming up today before we get stuck into the debate. Each Friday at 5, we'll put the spotlight on a particular guest or subject matter in my Friday Focus feature. And today, it's the impact of rising energy prices.
This time of year especially, we can't sort of say, I'll turn our heating off. I mean, the bills will just keep rising.
Together Energy is the latest supplier to go bust, and there's still no decision on whether struggling families will receive a £500 grant from the government as the price continues to soar. So where does this leave you? I'll be joined by an expert who'll answer your energy questions. So send us an email now, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not get in touch at GBNews, and we'll try our best to get your answer. And the Great British Debate this hour. New research in traditional red wall constituencies suggests that despite Partygate and pressure on the Prime Minister, voters aren't convinced by Labour either. The study by the group More in Common suggests that people don't believe Keir Starmer is the right man to lead the Labour Party into Downing Street. So I'm asking, if there was an election tomorrow, would you give your vote to Keir Starmer? Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, former Liberal Democrat MP Lemit Opik and also writer and commentator John Gaunt. So, welcome, guys. Look a bit cheery, John. Are you all right at the end there? You look...
Smarting, no, just getting a bit smarter for the act for you.
I love the tie.
Nana,
Look at your tie. How much was that?
more than you can afford. It's like if you have to ask how much it is, you can't afford it. It's a very posh company, and I won't advertise it. The same sorts of ties that your man Eamon Holmes wears on breakfast.
Oh, I see. So this is like so for those who are listening already, it's like a sort of lilac colour with this beautiful kind of. I mean, they sort of the flowers. They look sort of rosy, but they're not rosy. They're peachy colour with a bit of yellow in there.
Yeah, I just
very elegant.
I wanted to make the act look better, a bit smarter, be nice for you to look at, and also, of course, Lembert's gone to Poundland to get his tie, and
I got three ties for £1.
That was very good for you, very good for you. And it looked I'm just
because I'm with the people.
He's with the people. He's with the people. No, but being with the people, what do you think then, Lemmy? I'm going to start with you on what I just said, because there are so many people coming out and saying Boris has done this and Boris has done that. Then we start to scratch the surface. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, she was seen without a mask. Sadiq Khan seen without a mask. Even Gary Lineker seen without a mask in M&S. I mean, all these people, others. It turns out that you have met that and you did that, and I mean,
rank hypocrisy.
Exactly.
I actually think that we should never have legislated for any of this in the first place, because nobody should be above the law if they're preaching about the law. My view is...
But nobody should be above the law in any case, whether you're preaching or not, though.
But what I would have said is, what Boris Johnson would have won more respect for 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago, is saying, look, I'm not going to legislate for this because we're all imperfect, we're all going to make mistakes. But I'm just asking for us as team humanity to work together on this. But instead, he put laws in, and we know now that those laws have been broken, I believe, and somebody can sue me if they disagree, in Downing Street. Let's see what Sue Gray says. And then we've got Keir Starmer, the biggest disappointment in British politics. He had an open goal with no one defending on Wednesday in PMQs, and he missed the shot.
But even there,
the guy's useless.
But even there, though, he had some sort of event at the constituency, at a constituency office where I think he said there were 6 of them. I suppose, I don't know, I don't know, but then you could only have 6 people together, remember the deal. So he's obviously, he knows the deal. So he's saying 6, I don't know, and I'm sure that it was exactly as he says it is. And there he is seen drinking something that looks like alcohol. But the point is, he's doing it. And then when he was questioned, he then said, well, you know, would you apologise? They asked him, would you apologise for the way it looked? He refused. I'm
sure John will be the voice of reason here, but I have to say, I think that Keir Starmer has completely messed up his position here. He failed. I can say this now.
We're going to have a whole huge chat about that later, so we can save that for later.
So all I can say, therefore, is, as far as I'm concerned, let he who's without blame cast the first stone. And all of them are with blame. And that, ironically, that helps protect Boris. Boris is still a goner.
Did you hear? I mean, did you hear the Beth Rigby, the way she questioned Boris Johnson? But yet, has she forgotten about the party that she...
Have we finished talking about the Partygate? It's ridiculous. It's boring. The country is going to the dogs. And do you know what, Lembit? Ordinary people, my mates who work in factories in Coventry and Warwickshire, they don't give a flying you-know-what about it. Boris will get re-elected. And, you know, why are people bashing him all the time? Let me finish. I'll let you have at least 5 minutes.
Yes, let him
Boris, right, let me just tell you this straight. Boris, what he did was wrong. All those people who had drinks and broke the rules. I understand how that's upset people who lost loved ones or couldn't see their wife having a baby and all the rest of it. It's horrific. I was affected too. My family was affected. However, come on, get a grip. Let's move on. Let's get to the serious business of running this country. I'm more concerned about the immigrants, illegal, and some of them asylum seekers arriving at Dover. I'm worried about universal credit. I'm worried about the fact I can't pay my electricity and my gas bill, and I earn quite good money. They're the things we want to get on to. Stop bashing Boris. What is this? It's like a national pastime. And there's been people on this station as well. All they ever want to do is bashing.
Well, you say this station.
Brexit.
Well, listen, last night I was watching some other show on the BBC and I wasn't happy with the whole narrative because it didn't appear to be anyone even speaking in support. And when they did say, oh, well, is there anybody to speak in support? One person sheepishly put their hand up and then they put it down and the person who was actually hosting it said, oh, you put your hand up, but are you afraid to say anything? And of course, even if they were going to say anything in support, they were afraid to speak.
And it becomes self-censorship, which is the worst. Let me tell you, yesterday I said, stop bashing Boris. I put 400 new followers on my Twitter. I didn't do it to get 400 new followers, but I got loads of people saying, John, thank God you're saying this. This is what we think. You're in the minority, Lembit. You're in your polls.
I am in the minority on this panel. Let me just say what I think. I've been completely consistent on this. Do not tell me to follow rules you can't keep yourself. And then don't pretend that you actually didn't know the rules.
Well, listen,
that's my problem with
this. A lot of us I was very confused about the rules in the end. It was like, what can you... And now people are pretending that the rules made perfect sense. But they didn't make sense. They never made sense.
They were contradictory.
They were contradictory,
but you'd expect the Prime Minister at least to try and pretend that he understood them, because they're his rules.
Yeah, but you remember, it was somebody else who made the rules, actually, that woman who...
Oh, so you're defending Boris?
No, hang on. I haven't actually finished... Sorry, excuse me. I actually haven't finished speaking.
Sorry.
So it wasn't Boris that made those rules up, although it was in his government. It was some lady who also broke the rules herself, and they were her own rules. Right, so if you've just joined us, welcome on board. There's, of course, the voice of Lembit Opik and John Gaunt. You're with me, Nana Akua, on GBNews, on TV and on digital radio. Now, still to come, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, would you vote for the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, or should we say Sir Keir Starmer? New research by the group More in Common suggests that voters in traditional red wall constituencies don't believe that Keir Starmer is the right man to lead the Labour Party into Downing Street. So what do you think? I'm asking, would you vote for Keir Starmer? Send me an email now, gbnews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think on that matter. You can also tweet at GBNews. There's a poll up right now asking that very question. So would you vote for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer? Cast your vote now, but first, it's the weather.
Hello again. It's been a dry week for most of us, and that continues into the weekend. Often, though, it's going to be quite grey outside this weekend with a lot of cloud around. A few places we'll continue to see a bit of blue sky, but high pressure is dominating across the UK. This one's been ambling in from the west over the past couple of days and bringing with it across the west today quite a lot of cloud, and that cloud is going to become more extensive overnight. If heading out this evening, it's going to be dry, but most won't be as cold as last night. However, across parts of eastern England and at times in the south, we will still have clear skies, and that will allow temperatures perhaps to drop down close to freezing. But for most, that cloud acting like a blanket, keeping the temperatures higher than last night. The thickest cloud in the northwest, and there will be some patchy rain over the Highlands and the Western Isles. But here it will be a pretty mild start to Saturday, 6 or 7 Celsius. There will be some rain just trickling in across the Highlands through tomorrow, perhaps as far south as Argyll and Bute. A spot of drizzle possible over the hills in northwest England, but for most it's dry, but it is going to be mostly cloudy. Eastern England, parts of the south, northeast Scotland favour for some breaks in the cloud. And if we see some sunshine in the far northeast, 11, 12 degrees is possible, generally 8 or 9 top temperature, so a little milder than today. During Saturday evening, again, where we've got a few breaks in the cloud, there could be some pockets of frost, but most will just stay dry and cloudy, and that will keep the temperatures up. We'll keep a brisk breeze blowing throughout the weekend across the northwest. If anything, it's going to strengthen further during Sunday. But again, apart from a bit of drizzle here and there, most places will be dry. And again, a few breaks likely in the clouds, so could see some sunny spells during Sunday, but for most, just expect dry and cloudy. And temperatures, again, generally 6, 7, maybe 8 degrees Celsius. Top temperature probably in the northwest with a brisk breeze here, 10 or 11 Celsius. High pressure promising to keep things dry for most of us well into next week.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
This is GB News on TV and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, would you vote for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer? New research by the group More in Common suggests that he's struggling to convince voters in traditional red wall seats. The focus groups held in Blythe Valley, an area that's never been held by the Conservatives until 2019, found voters didn't believe Prime Minister Boris Johnson was telling the truth around Partygate and that he should resign. But interestingly, they said that they wouldn't vote for Labour leader Keir Starmer either, with some describing him as a millionaire who hadn't done much as a leader. So today I'm asking, would you vote for Keir Starmer? Get in touch. I'm joined now by the former Labour MP and former Minister of State for Europe, Dr. Dennis McShane. Dennis, thank you for joining me. Now, you've authored a book about Labour's electoral troubles. Does Keir Starmer, does he have what it takes to become a leader and get Labour back into power?
Well, my book is called Must Labour Always Lose? I thoroughly recommend a good read. It's full of cheerful anecdotes, really written, ending just as Sir Keir came in. Yes. People don't vote for a leader, they vote because they're really fed up with a government. Governments lose elections, oppositions don't win them. I mean, Tony Blair won a handsome election in 1997, but my God, I was there. Wasn't the faintest chance that John Major was going to be re-elected. If it's Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, truth, honesty, ethics, not telling lies, not breaking rules, not treating people as idiots, not insulting the Queen. Well, it's quite a long checklist. And I think actually the insult to the Queen from Boris Johnson, boozing away as she was there in her grief and all alone, waiting to bury Prince Philip. I know I represented a Red Wall seat. That will really have upset people. But we're not in an election yet, Nana, so I wouldn't take a lot of notice of one focus group.
Yeah, interestingly, though, I will just pick you up on that because even though, I'm not defending Boris for having parties and things, he wasn't actually there on that particular... I mean, if we're going to come back to it, then we need to represent the facts. He wasn't there. Apparently, he didn't know about it, and it did appear that they did everything to make sure that he didn't know what was going on. But yes, it was disrespectful of them to do that. And the culture that they're breeding is not a good one, so I will agree on that. So what are the main differences you give in your book between a successful and an unsuccessful Labour leader?
Very simply, a successful Labour leader has to make an historic compromise with the voters. You've got one huge pull factor from the people at your base. And sometimes they break through. I mean, they've broken through on Brexit in the sense the Conservative Party virtue was taken over by UKIP in the last few years. And it worked, combined with Boris Johnson. But also, I mean, in 2019, the biggest gift the Tories had was, I'm sorry, my old friend Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, putting him up to become Prime Minister was, what's the opposite of a no-brainer? I mean, it's a dead-brainer. Everybody in the Labour Party knew it was going to be a disaster. So the idea was a great Boris win. I mean, frankly, John Gaunt or Lembit Opik could have been running for Prime Minister and against Jeremy. But either of them would have now been number 10. So
why do you think? Because, I mean, you've mentioned an absolute truth there. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, terrible. What was the thinking there? They had the choice between David and Ed Miliband. They chose Ed Miliband. Most people would say that was the wrong choice. If they could have chosen, they should have chosen David because he appeared to have the charisma that Tony Blair had. They've had some, they seem to have made some astonishingly bad choices with the leader and now Keir Starmer. OK, so let's paint the picture. If Keir Starmer isn't a vote winner, is there anybody else in the Labour Party that you could see that could take up that mantle and win?
No. What I said was that I think the Tories will be big vote losers at the next election. They're almost certainly going to get rid of Boris Johnson, and it can work. In November 1990, so when you were barely out of school, Nana, there was a lady called Margaret Thatcher.
I'm 50.
And, the spring chicken. And Labour in November 1990 was on 53%, far higher than Keir Starmer is today. What did the Tories do? They dumped her. I mean, the greatest leader they've had since Winston Churchill. They just booted her into the dustbin of history, found some bland, boring, not very interesting guy. Apparently he likes cricket. And in December, a month later, the Tories were ahead in the polls and they went on to win the next election. That is what they'll do to Boris Johnson. There's no more frightening sound when you're an MP than the pitter-patter of tiny voters away from voting for you. And Tory MPs can hear that pitter-patter every moment of the day, which is why, I'm sorry, it's adios Boris. Who they then choose will be very interesting. But Keir Starmer will be there like Clement Attlee, he'll be there like Harold Wilson, he'll be there like Tony Blair or one of the Blair ministers, solid, competent, middle of the road, trying to bring people together. And I think at the next election, it'll be 14, 15 years. We've got inflation taking off, we've got energy prices taking off, we've got Brexit turning into a disaster, we've got 152,000, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to list to do Labour Party propaganda, but it's not been a great government. And when the pandemic smoke clears, we've got a country with more beggars on the streets than there are in Calcutta. We have more food banks.
I don't know about that. You've been to Calcutta. Listen, Peter, thank you so much for that.
I mean, the beggars on the streets, where I live in SW1, one of the richest parts of the world, the beggars on the streets shame us. We've got more food banks than McDonald's. We're going to hit the poor with a cut in universal credit.
Peter, I'm going to have to move on.
Sorry,
Peter, sorry, that's okay. Thank you so much for joining me then. Thank you for your thoughts, Peter.
Pleasure.
That's Peter Edwards. He's the former editor of the Labour List. Right, I'm also joined by the former editor of the Labour List, Peter Edwards. Have I just done this twice? Aren't Labour currently missing a huge own goal with the Conservatives in the position that they're in now? Do you think that Labour are just missing out here? They're slightly. They don't seem to be getting the right at all.
Good afternoon. No, I don't think Labour is missing a huge own goal at all. I think quite the opposite. Labour has a double-digit poll lead nationally. According to the poll this week, it has an 11-point lead in those crucial red wall seats. It's on course to win back 43 out of 46 of those. Of course, a lot's going to happen between now and the next election, and that could be the deposition of Boris Johnson, new Prime Minister. But Keir Starmer's doing very well. He's delivered raw changes in the Labour Party. He's getting a grip on anti-Semitism, which was a great evil and a great ill. He's introduced himself to the public. The conference explained what his values are, and I think he'll start to get into a bit more heavy policy area over the next 6 months.
So can I just ask, though, your thoughts then? Are you surprised at the fact that traditional red wall voters are not impressed with Boris, but they also won't vote for Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't accept the premise of your question at all. I think it's completely understandable that anyone in any seat is fed up with Boris Johnson and the scandal that has gripped his administration. But there's every sign that they're warming to Keir Starmer because he's patriotic, he's on the centre-left, and although it's become a bit of a cliched phrase, I believe he does support the value of hard work and giving people a fair deal. So, of course, there's a lot more work to do. Remember, Ed Miliband had a 10-point poll lead at one point of David Cameron before crashing to defeat. But I think Keir Starmer's had a very good 18 months or so. And people know he's a serious figure after we've had a national health and a national economic crisis.
Well, I was just going to come back to the premise of my question. It's actually based on some research. So that's where that comes from, where it was expressed by those that they found from that research that people in red wall seats wouldn't vote for Keir Starmer because they didn't really like him, but they also weren't happy and they felt that Boris should go. Now, do you think that the Labour Party have enough to sort of bring back some of those red wall voters now?
Yes, absolutely. But Labour needs to do a lot more. And Dennis McShane, your previous contributor, will remember this. Even in 1997, when Labour had an historic and overwhelming landslide, unbelievably, there was still a sense of nervousness in the weeks before polling day. Now, with hindsight, that seems almost paranoid, the opposite of complacency. But really, that shows, and the poll lead that Ed Miliband lost in the last year before his general election, shows whenever Labour thinks it's done enough, it has to do a bit more. Having a 10-point poll lead is not enough. Having a good candidate for Prime Minister is not enough. There's probably going to be a hostile print media again. There's still, I think, resentment on all sides of the spectrum over the Brexit referendum. So Labour needs strong leadership, which it's got, but it clearly needs a message on the economy, on immigration, on welfare and national security. And of course, there are many of the areas in which Jeremy Corbyn's campaign to be Prime Minister fell short.
It'd be interesting if they forgive the Labour Party for not supporting the red wall voters who went for Brexit. Listen, thank you so much for joining me, Peter. That's Peter Edwards, who's a former editor of the Labour List. Now, after the break, we'll continue the great British debate. I'm asking, would you vote for Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, which consists of former Liberal Democrat MP Len Vidopik and also writer and commentator John Gaunt. First, let's get your latest news headlines.
Just after 4:30, I'm in the GB newsroom with your latest top stories. And Downing Street has warned Moscow it will be punished by the UK and its allies if it decides to push ahead with destabilising action in Ukraine. It comes after the US and Russia held frank talks in Geneva today to try and ease tensions. Russia's Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov has insisted troops stationed on the border with Ukraine aren't poised to invade. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it's up to Russia to decide now whether diplomacy or conflict prevails. Here, the Business Secretary has told GB News claims of blackmail by Conservative whips over the distribution of public funds are ridiculous. Kwasi Kwarteng's comments follow reports that rebels are threatening to publish secret text messages and recordings from the Prime Minister's supporters. A suspected drug trafficker has been arrested just days after he was named as one of the UK's most wanted. 30-year-old Joshua Hendry was caught in Marbella in Spain after an off-duty police officer recognised him from publicity shots. He's alleged to have trafficked heroin and cocaine from Liverpool to Grimsby. He's going to appear in court as soon as possible as part of... And tributes are being paid to US singer Meat Loaf, who's died at the age of 74. His career spans 6 decades and saw him sell over 100 million albums with hits like that, I'd Do Anything for You, and of course the infamous Bat Outta Hell. on TV, online and through your radio on DAB+. You're with GB News. Now more from Nana Akua.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News. It's fast approaching 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. You're listening either on digital radio or watching us on TV. Now, after 5 o'clock, I'll be focusing on the increasing cost of energy in the UK.
This time of year especially, we can't sort of say, turn our heating off. I mean, the bills will just keep rising.
There's still no decision on whether struggling families will receive a £500 grant from the government as prices continue to soar. So where does this leave you? I'll be joined by an expert who will answer your energy questions. You can send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll try our best to get them answered for you. But first, let's get back to our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, would you vote for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer? This week, the More in Common group conducted a focus group with voters in Blythe Valley, a traditional red wall seat, but in 2019, the Tories took control. So despite most people in the focus group admitting that they didn't believe Prime Minister Boris Johnson was telling the truth regarding the party scandal, many still cast doubts over the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and his ability to lead. So today I'm asking, would you vote for Keir Starmer? Let's hear the thoughts of my panel, writer and commentator John Gaunt and former Liberal Democrat MP Lemit Opik. John, are you convinced by Labour?
No, Keir Starmer, well, he's got the charisma of this table, hasn't he? He looks a bit like Buzz Lightyear, but he's more wooden than woody. He certainly is. I don't know who's pulling his strings, but, you know, we've got to infinity and beyond. Send him. He is appalling. No, you're right, I'm right, aren't I?
I'm loving it, I'm loving it.
He is not a leader. He'll never be a leader while I've got a hole in my underpants. He's a dead loss. They'd be better, as you said earlier, getting David Miliband back or Andy Burnham in Manchester. But I'm not really bothered who Labour do, because let me tell you, stop the Boris, try saying that. Stop bashing Boris. Boris will get re-elected on a landslide. Oh, yes, he will, Lembit.
No, he won't.
Tell me another politician that would have brought us Brexit, got us the vaccination in the right way, despite all this, won us the Olympics, you could argue, when he got caught on the zip wire. Yes, he's a
caught accidentally on the
Yeah, but that was
wire.
funny. That was
Who
funny.
cares?
It was funny.
Lembit,
It's funny. He's a good
Lembit,
comedian.
you upped your profile, big boy, by going on, I'm a celebrity, and going out with both cheeky girls at the same time. So don't talk to me about publicity. Now it's your turn.
I'm not sure if that's libelous, but I'll have to check on that
Well,
one.
you can deny it. You're here to deny it if it's not true. Did you go out with both of them?
They're twins.
So you don't know which. He doesn't know which one was which.
Tell which one.
I'm not going to say this on there.
Take me to court. Take me to court. Please.
Moving swiftly on.
Right, go on. So let me. What do you?
I'm only pulling you.
I'm watching you.
I like
yes. What's your take?
My
on this?
view is, and I like you too.
That's really. Can you stop with this sort of bromance thing?
I don't like Keir Starmer. Well, I don't dislike him as a person. He's utterly useless as a Labour leader. Utterly useless.
Yeah, he is.
I watched on Wednesday. If Tony Blair... Now, I voted against Tony Blair on the war when I was in Iraq, and I thought that he completely misjudged that. I think it was an illegal war. But I'll say this. If Tony Blair had been in charge of Labour on Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, Boris would have resigned that day because he would have done an Exocet destruction job on Boris. I watched it. And I was cringing. I've never been in the Labour Party in my life. But I wanted Keir Starmer to make the points. And he didn't. Well, he sat there looking at his own team, waffling on about a defection that nobody really cared about.
Well, the defection was so poorly timed, wasn't it?
It was pathetic.
Well, it only ended up...
It actually helped the Tories.
It helped them, didn't it? Yes.
So as far as I'm concerned, and I actually don't get involved in party politics, particularly at the moment, but actually Ed Davey would have done better than Keir Starmer, because David at least has tried to stick to the point. Fundamental problem with Keir Starmer is he just doesn't seem to be, and this sounds a bit rude, but politically smart enough to take on Boris. Boris may be superficial in terms of his narrative, his political philosophy, but he's a damn sight smarter than Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer was Boris Johnson's biggest ally on Wednesday. The reason he's still in place is because of Keir Starmer.
I just want to... OK, so... And that could be the case. But then we also have to look at the policies of the Labour Party, which unfortunately they're very thin on the ground.
They haven't got any.
Even if... So this is what I'm seeing. Is so all you're doing is changing the head of this thing. So you change the head of the Tory party, so what's on the head, but the body's still the same. So the policies and everything follow through. The Labour Party... It's like this wobbly jelly with a wobbly head and nothing else. I mean, I don't know what there's no substance for them right now, and I want to hear what they are.
Although we're in danger of violently agreeing, and I feel uncomfortable about that, because it could be reputationally damaging for me to agree with John Gaunt. What I will say is this.
People know who you are.
Moving swiftly backwards. Actually, good point. The reality here is that I'll give you one example where Keir Starmer completely messed up in terms of policy. When Boris Johnson and his party wanted to introduce some more laws about COVID a few weeks ago, Keir Starmer should have said, we're voting against this because we all know that even the government doesn't keep the laws. Yeah. We're going to do a social contract of common sense and teamwork with the public. And you know what? He'd have won that because there were 99 Tory rebels. He was too politically
But
inept
aren't you
to do
beginning
that.
to sound like Captain Hindsight himself? Because we could all go...
I said it at the time.
But, OK, well, in that case, that's the issue that a lot of people have with Keir Starmer, that he seems to enjoy bashing the government on, you know, parties and this and that. He wants to focus on that because there's no substance to what the policies are. And I think we do need to be careful that we don't just oust Boris, end up with somebody who we don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss or any of the others.
I agree with what John's just about to say.
Because I think, you know, lots of people use football analogies with Keir Starmer. They keep saying he's missing an open goal. It's worse than that. You know, when a backstreet football team or a pub football team, they practice dribbling around dustbins, right? Well, Keir Starmer does that with Labour, but they lose 11-0. The dustbins win because they've got no tactical nous and they've got no skill and they've got no crowd applauding them. So, listen, Boris is the best we've got. Boris is our champion. Shush, I'll let you have your say.
Yeah, well,
there is nobody better. Sunak is unproven, looks good, but unproven. And, of course, he's just given away loads of our money. Loads of our money is going to be written off, right? Loads of our money, millions and millions of pounds. But the taxman's going to come for loads of ordinary working class people who are now in a bad situation.
Let's see what ordinary working class people think. Let's talk to some of our viewers, because this show is nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is, of course, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics that we're discussing. Dan Bryan is a hairdresser from Hull. Dan, thank you for joining us. Dan, talk to me. Would you vote for Keir Starmer?
No, I would struggle to vote for any of them actually these days. But like what Lembic and your other guest was saying, we have a threefold problem. I think there is a charisma issue, there is a policy issue, and there is also the fact that you were talking about the head and the body, it's just like a jelly, that there is a nondescript feeling at the minute that Labour doesn't stand for anything anymore. It used to represent the working class, but it doesn't represent the working class anymore. At the same time, when the Conservatives, they used to be conservative, but they're not conservative anymore. So people are feeling politically homeless, and he may very well be riding high in the polls, but I feel that's very much by default because the Tory vote has collapsed.
Thank you so much. Very succinct and great points. Yeah. That's Dan Bryan. He's from Hull. He's one of our great British voices. Lovely to talk to you. You can be on the show as well. You can join us. Prime Minister. He's good, isn't he? See?
Yeah, he's good.
And you could be part of the programme as well. We'd love it for you to get involved with our GB Voices. Get in touch with us. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, let's speak back to the panel. Lembit Opik and John Gaunt. You heard what Dan said. That was quite... he was quite right, wasn't he?
Dan's a sample of one, but I think that he probably expresses a lot of people's frustrations, moving away from the hyperbole, and we can have fun with it. The objective, and I can say this in 20 seconds.
If you could, that'd be great.
Be the first.
Unaccustomed as I am.
Hang on.
Basically, when it comes down to Keir Starmer, he's got a golden opportunity because he's got a wounded Prime Minister and he's blown it. As far as I'm concerned, Keir Starmer cannot credibly expect to be Prime Minister if he can't up his game.
Our viewer there, very interesting that he came from Hull. Obviously, traditional Labour seat. Everyone remembers John Prescott was there. Very working class. I know, because I lived there for 3 years. You only go to Hull if you go in there. You don't pass it on the way. They are the salt of the earth. They've been neglected. They've been left behind. Fishing fleet destroyed, etc., etc. But now they're at the centre of new technology. I don't like them myself, but they make and manufacture the big wind turbines. There's new investment going into Hull. It's a largely working class city and traditional Labour. And if you've got somebody like him, who's a hairdresser, who's obviously entrepreneurial as well, saying Starmer's not right for me.
And connected to the people.
Then because he'll be cutting hair. Yeah. Starmer, that's the problem. Because that man should be one of his voters, and he clearly isn't. I'm not saying he's going to vote for Boris, because he wasn't happy with Boris either. But this is where the Labour Party are wrong. They've got to get their act together quickly, and they've got to have somebody who can sell it, and they've got no salesman in their team.
Absolutely right.
Well, but that's fair enough. But do we want a salesperson? I mean, Boris is exactly that, and it doesn't seem to be working out for him either. But lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Richard says, this is why Boris won't quit. There's no one else in that parliament more electable than him at this time. People may be angry about Partygate. However, I don't believe that will translate into votes.
Absolutely.
Paul says this, well, I've always voted Labour, but I won't be from now, not when Sir Keir Starmer is leader. Michael says, I'm a Red Wall former Labour voter. Today, I just don't see Labour and the Union Jack sitting comfortably together. Alan has said this, Keir's mother was a nurse and his dad was a toolmaker. He's actually working class, unlike Boris. Well, there's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show, and I'm asking, would you vote for Keir Starmer? And currently, do you want to guess? 90% of you say absolutely no way. Interesting. So, after the break, NHS dentistry is hanging by a thread, with some patients facing 2-year waits for checkups. But looking at the private route isn't always affordable. I'll be chatting to a celebrity dentist, Hannah Kinsella, next. But first, let's get some weather.
Hello again. It's been a dry week for most of us, and that continues into the weekend. Often, though, it's going to be quite grey outside this weekend with a lot of cloud around. A few places we'll continue to see a bit of blue sky, but high pressure is dominating across the UK. This one's been ambling in from the west over the past couple of days and bringing with it across the west today quite a lot of cloud, and that cloud is going to become more extensive overnight. If heading out this evening, it's going to be dry, but most won't be as cold as last night. However, across parts of eastern England and at times in the south, we will still have clear skies, and that will allow temperatures perhaps to drop down close to freezing. But for most, that cloud acting like a blanket, keeping the temperatures higher than last night. The thickest cloud in the northwest, and there will be some patchy rain over the Highlands and the Western Isles. But here it will be a pretty mild start to Saturday, 6 or 7 Celsius. There will be some rain just trickling in across the Highlands through tomorrow, perhaps as far south as Argyll and Bute. A spot of drizzle possible over the hills in northwest England, but for most it's dry, but it is going to be mostly cloudy. Eastern England, parts of the south, northeast Scotland favour for some breaks in the cloud. And if we see some sunshine in the far northeast, 11, 12 degrees is possible, generally 8 or 9 top temperatures, so a little milder than today. During Saturday evening, again, where we've got a few breaks in the cloud, there could be some pockets of frost, but most will just stay dry and cloudy, and that will keep the temperatures up. We'll keep a brisk breeze blowing throughout the weekend across the northwest. If anything, it's going to strengthen further during Sunday. But again, apart from a bit of drizzle here and there, most places will be dry. And again, a few breaks likely in the clouds, so could see some sunny spells during Sunday, but for most, just expect dry and cloudy. And temperatures, again, generally 6, 7, maybe 8 degrees Celsius. Top temperature probably in the northwest with a brisk breeze here, 10 or 11 Celsius. High pressure promising to keep things dry for most of us well into next week.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. Now, the British Dental Association had says that NHS dentistry is hanging by a thread, with some patients facing 2-year waits for checkups. Department of Health data shows almost 1,000 dentists working in 2,500 roles across England and Wales. They left the NHS last year. But for patients heading to a private dentist, it isn't cheap at all. I know this because it's cost me a fortune to get this crown thing done. I haven't got it finished yet. I've had to pay in instalments. Right, so let's discuss this with celebrity dentist Hannah Kinsella. Hannah, thank you for joining us. Now, you actually used to be an NHS dentist. Why did you decide to go to the private sector?
Do you know what? I've got a huge amount of respect for NHS dentistry, but I think for myself, I really wanted to be able to spend the extra time with patients, and also, you know, sometimes with regards to sort of treatments, treatment options, materials that you can use, I just feel like you've got a lot more sort of array of choice in private practice than you do in NHS dentistry.
So there's quite a bit of difference, because I thought they were quite similar. So just give me an example then of one of the things that, in terms of, say, that you might get differently.
Yeah, I think the thing is with NHS dentistry, it's there as a baseline. It's there to provide, you know, the basic health for the general public. And I think with private dentistry, you know, there's quite a few different differences in a sense that, you know, patient waiting times, for example, also appointment times, so the clinicians can spend a lot more time with individual patients. And there are differences in materials that we use and as such like that.
Go on. Because it looks as though, I mean, the cost of going to the dentist is actually rising at around about 5% each year. And I'm wondering, in your eyes, why is the price going up? I mean, it's becoming unaffordable for most people. I mean, even NHS dentistry, the prices are just going up.
Yeah, I think the thing is with dentistry in general, I think what people don't realise is that the actual cost of dentistry is high. So the materials, the equipment, the cost of the nurses, cost of PPE, cost of maintenance of the machinery that we use, it is generally a very expensive, it's expensive to have those kind of procedures. And I think, a lot of times where if patients do say, oh, well, why is it costing so much? It's the fact that it's the clinician's time, it's the materials that we use, it's a whole host of things that are contributing to the cost of private dentistry and also in the NHS as well.
Well, it's obviously treating you well, this private thing. I mean, you're getting in touch from the Maldives. Lovely there, isn't it? You're having a nice holiday in the Maldives. Beautiful, isn't it?
It is lovely. Yes, it is lovely. Thank you, yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you about waiting lists then, because you mentioned it with the NHS. Do you think, or do they do this? I mean, it's so for hospitals, for example, I think they do this sometimes with hospitals, but do they sort of help out the NHS sometimes, and NHS sort of palm patients onto the private sector? Does that ever happen?
No. The NHS and the private sector are two completely different things. I think what's happened, especially during the pandemic, during that very first lockdown, all dentists were closed. Crazy as it sounds, we were deemed as non-essential workers. So the whole of dentistry across the UK completely shut down for almost 3 months. So as you can imagine, there was a huge backlog of patients and lots of people that were mid-treatment, lots of people that needed emergency care, and all of that was at a complete standstill. So what's happened is once everything's opened up again, you've got all of these patients that needed their treatment completing, lots of people that perhaps have had pain or, that they needed to come in and see the dentist, huge amount of backlog. And I think that's where they've really struggled, with especially with like routine appointments such as checkups and hygiene visits. They sort of took a bit of a back seat, and it was more sort of seeing the emergency cases and also people that were midway through treatment. So that's the real issue, I think.
Well, listen, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us from the Maldives. You lucky lady. Enjoy your holiday. Thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us.
Thank you. Thanks.
That's Hannah Kinsella. She's a dentist. Right, well, if you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. There's more to come in the next hour. So this is GB News on your TV and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, for the next hour, my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is writer and commentator John Gaunt and former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik. Still to come, every Friday at 5, we put the spotlight on a particular guest or a subject matter in My Friday Focus feature. And today, we're discussing the impact of rising energy prices.
This time of year especially, we can't sort of say, I'll turn our heating off. I mean, the bills will just keep rising.
Together Energy is the latest supplier to go bust, and there's still no decision on whether struggling families will receive a £500 grant from the government as prices continue to soar. We'll be discussing this in a few moments, and I'll be joined by an expert to answer your questions. The Great British Debate, that's on the way this hour. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall has announced she'll reopen 6 local police stations in the area, a move that she says is controversial with chief constables. So I'm asking, should we go back to basics and reintroduce local police stations to help reduce crime? And of course, we want to hear your thoughts. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. At 5 o'clock, I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. The top story. Downing Street has warned Moscow Russia will be punished with a package of sweeping measures if its troops enter Ukraine. It comes after the US and Russia held urgent talks in Geneva today to ease tensions. The Kremlin has made a series of demands and is waiting for a written response. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it's up to Russia to decide whether diplomacy or conflict prevails.
So that's the choice that Russia faces now. It can choose the path of diplomacy that can lead to peace and security, or the path that will lead only to conflict, severe consequences, and international condemnation. The United States and our allies and partners in Europe stand ready to meet Russia on either path, and we will continue to stand with Ukraine.
Well, earlier on, the British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss called on Russia to desist and step back from Ukraine. Speaking in Australia, she said an invasion would lead to a terrible quagmire and loss of life.
They claim they want stability while they work to threaten and destabilise others. We know what lies down that path and the terrible toll in lives lost and human suffering it brings. That's why we urge President Putin to desist and step back from Ukraine before he makes a massive strategic mistake.
Liz Truss. Well, away from that story, the business secretary has told GB News claims of blackmail by Conservative whips over the distribution of public funds are frankly ridiculous. Boris Johnson says he's seen no evidence to support the claims. Kwasi Kwarteng's comments follow reports that rebels are threatening to publish secret text messages and recordings from the Prime Minister's supporters.
All public spending goes through proper process. There's a proper official paper trail, if you like. There's a proper procedure through which public finance, taxpayers' money ultimately is allocated. So any idea that the Whip's office have this in their gift, I think should be challenged immediately. And clearly, if these allegations are true, that's a very, very serious allegation, and I'd want to see them properly investigated.
Kwasi Kwarteng. A suspected drug trafficker has been arrested in Spain just days after he was named as one of the UK's most wanted. 30-year-old Joshua Hendry was caught in Marbella in southern Spain after an off-duty police officer recognised him from publicity. He's alleged to have trafficked heroin and cocaine from Liverpool to Grimsby. He'll appear in court as part of extradition proceedings. A former senior Metropolitan Police officer has been jailed for 3 years for using hidden spy cameras to film women without them knowing. Neil Corbell, a detective inspector at the time, booked models for photo shoots before planting gadgets in hotel rooms. The married father of two and former counter-terrorism officer was caught after one woman noticed a camera was hidden in a digital clock. He pleaded guilty to 19 voyeurism offences carried out last September. A 33-year-old man has been charged with murdering an 86-year-old and trying to kill her husband. Vasile Kulea was arrested yesterday after Frida Walker from Derbyshire was killed in the attack at her home on Saturday. Her 88-year-old husband, Ken, suffered life-threatening injuries and is in hospital. Kulea from Nottinghamshire will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. More than 300 people have been rescued by the Italian Coast Guard off the island of Lampedusa. 2 patrol vessels saved the migrants who were crowded onto a 15-metre-long boat around 20 miles off the coast. The Coast Guard says the boat was carrying an excessive number of people and could have capsized if they hadn't intervened. Tributes are being paid to the US singer Meat Loaf, who's died at the age of 74. Meat Loaf's career, which spanned 6 decades, saw him sell over 100 million albums, with hits like that, I'd Do Anything for Love, and of course, Bat Out of Hell. He starred in 65 movies, including The Rocky Horror Picture Show and Wayne's World. And staying with entertainment, Adele has apologised to fans for postponing the start of her Las Vegas residency because she said her show wasn't ready. The singer said her production team tried everything to pull it together in time, but delivery delays and COVID infections within her team made it impossible. The show was due to open today and run most Fridays and Saturdays until April. On Instagram, she apologised to fans who'd already travelled to see the show. This is GB News, more news as it happens, but now more from Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV and on digital radio. Now it's time for my Friday Focus, and today I'm talking about energy prices. Inflation's now at its highest point since 1992 at 5.4%, and it's putting the squeeze on households up and down the UK who are struggling to pay the costs of everyday life. A huge rise in energy prices isn't helping either, and it's a real concern. So today, the Business Secretary, Kwasi, has said that we'll have to wait until March to find out if a scheme to hand out £500 grants to help struggling families with energy bills will go ahead. And just this week, another energy provider, Together Energy, went bust. So I'm joined in the studio by energy expert and senior research fellow at Imperial College London, Malcolm Grimston, to explain all this. So, Malcolm, first of all, talk to me about this, the price rises in energy. Why is that happening?
It's a collection, unfortunate collection of loads of things happening at the same time. We had a bad winter last year. That meant gas reserves were run down for that. Because of COVID, for example, in the North Sea, maintenance wasn't done. That means the flow of gas from the North Sea isn't as high as we'd like it to. There was very low wind speeds for much of last year. That meant we had to use more gas for electricity. We had a power pipeline across to France has gone down, which means we're burning more gas for electricity at home. And as with anything else, if supply doesn't meet demand, prices go up.
So what about the green energy subsidies and things like that? The taxes that are put on the energy that we're paying for now. What kind of an impact is that having?
That's right. I mean, that's something like a quarter of our energy bills. Roughly speaking, half of it is the wholesale price, and that's set internationally. We can't do much about that. A quarter of it is the wires and pipelines to get it from where it's made into our homes. And you may recall a few weeks ago, we were very concerned about power going out for a week in Scotland. It may be we need to spend more on the wires. So, but anyway, we can't do much about that. Where government does have some leeway is in taxation, both VAT, but that's only 5% of the total, and some of the green subsidies for renewable energy.
So the government really doesn't have much leverage on this at all. They've got very little control, is what you're saying on this. Apart from, obviously, as you say, VAT, they could potentially remove that. And of course, there's the levies for the green taxes. But
yes, I mean, VAT would be worthwhile, but that would be £100 on a £2,000 bill,
it's not even,
which has gone up from £1,300 recently. It's worth having for many people. No, I think the approach needs to be targeted support for those who are in energy poverty. There are some positives for energy prices being high. One, it makes us take energy efficiency more seriously. Japan has very high power prices, but its bills are roughly the same as ours, because those high prices have meant that people have had to invest in using energy better. So that's a positive. And the other is, of course, if you're short of capacity, high prices sends a signal to the market to invest, and that's how prices come down in the longer term. So artificially massaging the price itself in the long term may not be a particularly clever thing to do, whereas supporting those who will face the most dreadful things this winter already. You mentioned that the inflation is 5.4% overall. Energy price inflation is much, much higher than that, possibly as much as 50% over the course of this year. That won't last forever, but one can just imagine people who are already struggling to heat their homes, the sort of effect that could have.
And where do we get, so our electricity, in terms of percentage-wise, what are we getting? So, because obviously we're talking about going green, but I'm presuming some of it's from fossil fuel. I'm presuming some of it's from wind, some of it might be nuclear.
Natural gas is still the single biggest source of electricity, rather more than a third of our total. Wind has increased very significantly. Wind is now around the 20% mark. Nuclear has been 20% for many years, but with the closure of the older plants, that's dropping down now to about 15% or less. Solar makes some contribution, although not huge in the United Kingdom. And then we do import some electricity from France. We hardly use any coal at all. It's been the most extraordinary revolution. But one of the other things is it does very much vary what day you're on. If it's a windy day, we have seen times when winds produce more than half our electricity. We've seen others, often only a few days later, when it's only producing 1 or 2%. And gas is the one that steps in to fill any of that gap.
What about with all these energy companies that are going bust? So I think the last count was about 40 of them, Together Energy being the latest. If people are stuck with what happens? So if I was with Together Energy and it went bust, what happens to me?
Well, there is a guarantee that another provider will be found for you. And basically, the big 6 power companies are the ones who have picked up the most of those. What you don't get is a guarantee that you'll be paying the same price that you were before. Indeed, if you think about it, the reason these companies are going bust very often is that they didn't, what we call hedge, they didn't buy some of their gas a year ahead, as the big companies did, to keep the price down. Now, that meant they could offer lower prices in the short term, but they were blown away when the price shot up as it was at the moment. They simply couldn't buy power for the same price that they were selling it on. Now, you can't say to the big companies, right, take on this massive loss with consumers, because ultimately then the big companies themselves would start to face financial problems, then we really would be in trouble. So you get a guarantee of a move, but chances are you'll be moved up to a contract that in effect is at whatever the price cap is at a particular moment at the moment.
What if you're in a deficit for your company? So if you owe your energy company some money, but you're in deficit, will that debt just be moved on? What happens there?
I'm not sure. That's a very good question, actually, which I've not thought about before. I mean, what the government has done a great deal is to try and prevent anybody actually being cut off because they're in energy poverty but not being able to meet their bills, although ultimately, of course, that's a requirement. But government, I think, is going to have to offer guarantees to these big companies that if they take on consumers, they're both not going to take on any debts and they're not going to take on prices which they can't even break even, let alone make any money.
Yeah, because if you try to change supplier and you owed your previous supplier money, you need to pay that up before you can move to another one. So I'm just wondering what happens to people who owe this and then can't.
Yes, I wonder. What I don't know is whether once a company goes bust, in fact, it goes bust with its debts. So any consumer who owes money to that company wouldn't necessarily, that may just be wrapped up in the insolvency of the company.
So they might not have to pay it back?
Yeah, it might not, yes, it might
hey,
not
happy
be
days. Sorry, I don't mean it like that. It's not quite, because the next supplier you go to will probably be charging a lot more.
Well, yes, and yeah, frankly, people who have reached the level of fuel poverty, they can't pay their bills. They need our support, I think.
Well, of course, but it does help a little bit if they don't have to pay the big debt back if they can get out of that. I wonder what the deal is. That I will find out and see what happens to people if they can't. And so when you're put on this with this other company, you then have to literally write it. And are there any deals at the moment, or is it just not the right time to even be bothering with that sort of thing?
One of the problems with price caps is that they send a signal to the market, which almost is, don't invest here because you're not going to be allowed to make any money for it. So at the moment, we don't have a functioning market. Anybody who is moving consumers, in effect, is immediately put onto a tariff at the price cap because I don't think even at the price cap companies are making any money. So in effect, it doesn't matter which company you go to. I don't think there are any deals there in the marketplace at the moment below the actual price cap. And the price cap will shoot up over the course of this year. In due course, competition has had some benefits. And we should recognise that. It works when there isn't this massive dislocation in international wholesale prices, for example. But I think it'll be some time before a meaningful market really reasserts itself.
God, typical, isn't it? And the prices never go down when the price goes down. When the price comes up, the price goes up, so the price keeps rising.
That's actually a bit unfair. There have been times when we've seen falling energy prices.
Well, only sometimes.
But as I said before, the wires you can't do much about. The taxes have been going up. So even if wholesale prices come down, that's not the whole story.
Well, obviously, this is a story that will run and run. Malcolm, thank you very much for joining me. That's Malcolm Grimston. He's an energy expert and senior research fellow at Imperial College. But how's the energy price hike impacting families across the UK? Here's what you've been telling us.
We've got two young children. I work part-time, my husband works full-time, and we have noticed a big difference, a rise in the gas prices. And we have to have our heating on. I mean, it's cold, it's, this time of year especially, we can't sort of say, I'll turn our heating off. I mean, the bills will just keep rising.
It's a terrible thing. There's a lot of people on a breadline, it's going to hit them the hardest because, as lots of the news have been reporting, it's not the people who are fairly well off who get affected. People like, I'm fortunate enough to be able to sort of take the hit.
To run a business, especially our business, is based on electricity. We don't have any gas, so electricity prices are high, and the fryer we use uses a lot of power. So at the moment, I'm worried because I pay a lot at the moment, and I know it's going to keep going up at the next year it's going to go up, and it's going to be very expensive.
You're pretty much stuck in a circle that's just going to cost you money. So you can't do anything about it. You can't argue the case that you don't want to go with the provider you've been given because your provider's gone bankrupt or bust. You have to go with the provider that they've given you. So in terms of that, you are stuck in between a rock and a hard place, and I can't see how the government can just sit back and do nothing about it.
Well, lots of you have been getting in touch with your questions that you have about the current situation. I'm pleased to say the CEO of Quote for Energy, Lindsay Jones, joins me to answer some of them. So before we answer some of those questions, though, Lindsay, what's your biggest piece of advice to customers at the moment?
I think at the moment it is really difficult for households at the moment, and in a world of technology, we have everything plugged in all of the time. There's a few things that households can do. Turn things off. I mean, a lot of things in my house are left on all the time. It's like Blackpool illuminations with the lights. If you're not using it, turn it off. You can turn your heating down, even by turning it down 1 degree. The National Trust Energy Saving.
Oh, we've just lost her. Well, the thing is, though, I mean, we're talking a lot about energy, and I mean, we've been talking about your thoughts as well. So get in touch with us at GBNews. We'd love to hear what you think about it. Steve has been in touch, and he says, I usually switch at this time of the year, and that is a bad idea at the moment. So a lot of people saying that that's not a good idea. Vera asks, do you think that the price increases might cause problems working towards greener energy? Right, well, let's have a chat and find out what her thoughts are on there. Well, listen, I've got a couple of questions for you. I'll give you the question from Vera, actually. Well, let's do Steve's question, because he's the first one. He says, I usually switch at this time of the year. Is that a bad idea at the moment?
The difficulty, Steve, is that suppliers' prices are all roughly the same. There's nowhere really to change to, and that's because the price that they're buying the energy at and they're able to pass it on to consumers at is more than what the cap has been set at. So everybody in the supplier world is roughly around the same, and some suppliers are...
Oh, we've lost you again. We've got lots of questions coming in as well. I tell you what, listen, we'll come back with those questions and get you some of your questioned answers. But coming up, the Great British Debate is on the way. Should we reintroduce local police stations to tackle crime? The Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall has announced she'll reopen 6 local police stations in the area, a move that she says is controversial with chief constables. But first, let's check out your weather.
Hello again. It's been a dry week for most of us, and that continues into the weekend. Often, though, it's going to be quite grey outside this weekend with a lot of cloud around. A few places we'll continue to see a bit of blue sky, but high pressure is dominating across the UK. This one's been ambling in from the west over the past couple of days and bringing with it across the west today quite a lot of cloud, and that cloud is going to become more extensive overnight. If heading out this evening, it's going to be dry, but most won't be as cold as last night. However, across parts of eastern England and at times in the south, we will still have clear skies, and that will allow temperatures perhaps to drop down close to freezing. But for most, that cloud acting like a blanket, keeping the temperatures higher than last night. The thickest cloud in the northwest, and there will be some patchy rain over the Highlands and the Western Isles. But here it will be a pretty mild start to Saturday, 6 or 7 Celsius. There will be some rain just trickling in across the Highlands through tomorrow, perhaps as far south as Argyll and Bute. A spot of drizzle possible over the hills in northwest England, but for most it's dry, but it is going to be mostly cloudy. Eastern England, parts of the south, northeast Scotland favour for some breaks in the cloud. And if we see some sunshine in the far northeast, 11, 12 degrees is possible, generally 8 or 9 the top temperature, so a little milder than today. During Saturday evening, again, where we've got a few breaks in the cloud, there could be some pockets of frost, but most will just stay dry and cloudy, and that will keep the temperatures up. We'll keep a brisk breeze blowing throughout the weekend across the northwest. If anything, it's going to strengthen further during Sunday. But again, apart from a bit of drizzle here and there, most places will be dry. And again, a few breaks likely in the cloud, so could see some sunny spells during Sunday, but for most, just expect dry and cloudy. And temperatures, again, generally 6, 7, maybe 8 degrees Celsius. Top temperature probably in the northwest with a brisk breeze here, 10 or 11 Celsius. High pressure promising to keep things dry for most of us well into next week.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're on the money.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
23 minutes after 5 o'clock, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV and on digital radio. Right, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we reintroduce local police stations to tackle crime? The Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall is planning to reopen 6 local police stations in the area. Alison Hernandez says the move is controversial with chief constables, but she hopes it will revive confidence in police forces. Let's get my panel's take on it. I'm joined by former Liberal Democrat MP Lemmy Dopic and also writer and commentator John Gaunt. I always want to say writer and comedian, but you're not.
I can tell a few jokes if you want.
No,
Who's laughing now?
Well, what do you think of this? Because I remember when I was young, there was a little police station down the road. You felt like there was some sort of community. Now they're all being closed down.
I'd go further than that. My dad was a policeman for 30 years, and he walked the beat in Jubilee Crescent in Radford in Coventry, which is now quite a rough area. It was always a bit kind of rough. But they had a police box. Remember the old TARDIS that they have in Doctor Who?
Yes.
And he said, walking the beat, and then the police box, and then there was a local station as well, of course. It was actually a substation in Jubilee Crescent. It meant that people knew where they were and they'd come and find you. And he said the idea of walking the beat wasn't necessarily to arrest people there and then. You got a little tip-off from the butcher, the greengrocer, you know, and the local people. Yeah, thanks. When I need you to be my sidekick, I'll ask. Until then, shut up. He's trying to get on my comedy act. This is what he's trying to do.
Well, neither of you.
I've done it before.
Neither of you very funny. I'll tell you what, I'm going to have a chat with I guess we'll come back.
Yeah, but all I'm trying to say is that gave the community cohesion. That's the point.
Well, I would agree with that. It's a nice thing as well. Listen, let's have a chat with Rupert Matthews, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire. Rupert, thank you for joining me. What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with Alison to reopen some of the police stations that have shut?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on. Yes, absolutely. I think that's completely correct. I was visiting Market Bosworth only yesterday, and the police station there closed some years ago. But it's actually still there. We've got a police office, which is where the officers go when they have to do paperwork or, you know, they've got to have a cup of tea, spend a penny, something like that. But it's closed to the public. And not only that, but there's not even a blue light outside saying it's a police station. As far as the local residents are concerned, there's no police station at all. And I think it's absolutely right. we do need to open up some sort of a public-facing facility. Now, opening up a front desk full-time isn't always appropriate, but yes, we do need to have a public-facing facility, not only where police stations have closed down, but like Alison, I know, we'd like to see them springing up elsewhere in little market towns and the larger villages.
Can you see a direct link with the fact that people have lost a lot of respect for the police and the fact that these stations have closed up so you can't actually communicate with the police? It's very, very difficult.
Well, one of the reasons I decided to stand to be Police Crime Commissioner in the first place is to try to improve the relationship between the police and the law-abiding public. The police, quite rightly, of course, spend a lot of time talking to victims, a lot of time dealing with crime. But as your previous guest just said, gathering intelligence from local residents, from shopkeepers, from people who run local businesses, they're the people that know what's going on. They know where drugs are being dealt. They know where antisocial behaviour is taking place. And a good beat copper can pick up on all that information and can use that not to solve crime so much, but to stop crime taking place in the first place and deter crime, which so many people find really blights their lives.
Mm. Well, Rupert, there are some chief constables who are opposed to spending more money on local stations. Why would they oppose that?
Well, I mean, the chief constables are quite right. Having, if you like, a full-blown police station with all the facilities you expect in a major police station is very expensive. But I think what Alison and I are trying to argue is that you don't need to have the all-singing, all-dancing police station. What you need to have is somewhere where people can go if they want to give a witness statement, where people can go if they want to hand something in, where people can just make an appointment to see a police officer. Now, you don't need custody cells for that. You don't need to have with radio and so on. Basically, you just in a market village, somewhere where people can go.
Your line's breaking up a little bit, Rupert, but we get sort of gist of what you're saying on that as well. And I'm wondering, has there been too much focus on reporting crime sort of digitally and over the phone and things? Because I tell you what, it's very, very irritating. I was trying to sort out a speeding ticket the other day, in fact yesterday, and the issue is just so difficult because I had to phone so-and-so because I sent my licence off to here and there, and I mean, it took me around some sort of weird journey until I eventually got to speak to someone who sent me back on the journey. I mean, is there too much focus on this digital thing?
Well, I mean, digital reporting does work, and I know that our email and the people tapping things in through websites and social media, we monitor that 24 hours a day, so, you know, it does work. But it doesn't work for everyone, and you're quite right. If you're dealing with something that's a little bit more complicated, sometimes you just want to go and meet a police officer and say, here's what I want to report, here's the document I've got to show. And it is really important that the police allow that and have the facility for that to happen, which is where all these little local offices, I think, really can be enormously valuable.
Mm. Oh, well, Rupert, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Rupert Matthews. He's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying about this. Johnny says, yes, every village, hamlet and small town should have a police station. They have to be multi-rolled, though, and be able to deploy armed response quickly as well. I like that. I like that a lot. He's right. He's right, though. There's no point in just having... I don't like the idea of these
armed
little...
response?
Absolutely, little TARDIS type thing. Oh, well, you can go in there, he's in there. Yeah, armed response. I think they should have proper units in proper stations, and we should go back to what we were.
Would you arm all the... They didn't have guns in the old days.
I'm not talking about guns. You're the only one that's talked about guns.
Armed response means that.
But armed response... No, but armed response units in each town, I think there's absolute necessity, especially...
We just need to get bobbies back on the beat. If the only time you ever meet a policeman is when your house has been burgled or your car...
Well, you won't meet one then.
No, but...
You won't meet one then.
That is the only time people are meeting. If they're lucky enough not just to be given a crime number straight away, we need bobbies back on the beat, we need them part of the community, and that would also help with things like knife crime.
Of course.
And you know what? I think we need coppers who, those little scroats who are a little bit scared of, we need a bit more Gene Hunt and a little less Dick of the Yard. And when my old man was on the beat, it'd give you somebody like you, Len, being cheeky. You'd get a clip round the ear, and you'd know your place.
I wish it sort of went into a language that I completely didn't understand. Right, Russell says, how will that tackle crime? That will cost an absolute fortune to build and maintain. Why not just put contact centres in local town halls, libraries, even supermarkets? Yeah, but listen, I tell you what, Russell, you need to get on the phone and try and speak to a police officer and see what happens there. You might change your mind. Jess says, obviously, yes, growing up, most villages had their own policeman who was a true community officer. They know everyone and everything, and that was what was going on. They were respected and taught respect. See, it's so basic and so simple. We've answered it, but they don't seem to be able to. If you've just joined in, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV and digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue our Great British debate. And I'm asking, should we reintroduce local police stations to tackle crime? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former Liberal Democrat MP Lermit Opik and writer and commentator John Gaunt. I'll also be discussing face masks in education, as some secondary schools across England say they'll encourage students to wear masks indoors, despite the government's announcement to stop the wearing of them in classrooms. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's just after 5:30. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. Our top stories: Downing Street has warned Moscow will be punished by the UK and its allies if it pushes ahead with destabilising action in Ukraine. It comes after the US and Russia held frank talks in Geneva today to try to ease tensions. Russia's Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov has insisted troops stationed on the border with Ukraine are not poised to invade. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, however, says it's up to Russia to now decide whether diplomacy or conflict prevails. Here, the Business Secretary has told GB News claims of blackmail by Conservative whips over the distribution of public funds are ridiculous. Kwasi Kwarteng's comments follow reports that rebels are threatening to publish secret text messages and recording from the PM's supporters. A suspected drug trafficker has been arrested in Spain just days after he was named as one of the UK's most wanted. 30-year-old Joshua Hendry was caught in Marbella after an off-duty police officer recognised him from the publicity. He's alleged to have trafficked heroin and cocaine from Liverpool to Grimsby. He'll appear in court as part of extradition proceedings. Including Cher, Brian May and Bonnie Tyler are among those who've paid tribute to the US singer Meat Loaf, who's died at the age of 74. His career spans 6 decades and saw him sell over 100 million albums with hits like I'd Do Anything for You, I'd Do Anything for Love, rather, which you heard just there, and of course the famous Bat Out of Hell. On TV, online and through your radio on DAB+. You're with GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua on TV and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 36 minutes after 5 o'clock, and it's back to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we reintroduce local police stations to tackle crime? The Police and Crime Commissioner for Cornwall and Devon is planning to reopen 6 stations in the region, but there's opposition from some who worry that this could undo a decade of cost-cutting measures. So let's get back to my panel, discuss this further. I'm joined with I can't make up my mind now. Oh, I don't know who you are. Former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik, and also writer and commentator John Gaunt. Right, so Lembit, would you welcome the old sort of Bobby on the beat locally? The little...
Yeah, absolutely. It might not even statistically reduce crime, but it certainly reassures people.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's a public service that we pay for. And if we want to have local police stations, we should have them. I remember when my grandmother lived in Leicester, and there was a police station near the house, and it was kind of reassuring to her just to know it was there. How do we pay for it? Here's the controversy, Nana.
Go on, then.
I would actually legalise all drugs, and I would...
oh, for goodness sake.
Hang on a sec.
Sorry, Karen.
Let me finish, as John might say.
Have you been taking some drugs?
I would legalise all drugs, and I would tax them on the basis that most people aren't going to become drug addicts because they're legal, and the money you get from taxing them will more than pay for the reopened police stations. And secondly, we'll deal incidentally, that we're not discussing this really, with the problem that the drugs cause in the first place. So that's a way of paying for it.
Maybe you might cause more problems by legalising drugs potentially and give yourself a bit more of a headache.
Okay,
but the
talk
other,
about that separately.
The other, well, you brought it in here. But the other side of it is, of course, if you do this, you legalise them, then even though you probably will have a bigger problem, and then you've got still the issue.
You don't have a bigger problem.
How did we do it before? Because before we paid and had these police stations open, we ran things properly. I don't understand why we're failing now.
The way they used to do it, and I know because I was brought up in a police house, we all lived in police houses like council houses. Now, I don't want coppers to go back to that. I want them to have property, part of the property-owning democracy.
Yeah.
However, coppers weren't paid right. They then got paid right during Mrs Thatcher's reign. But the idea that you legalise drugs and then you use the money for that, you legalise crime, it's absolutely ridiculous. Well, you've had your say.
Yeah,
what we actually need to do, we need to put coppers back in the community. And I'll tell you something else we need to do. We need to make people pay their fines. And if they don't pay their fines, they should be doing community service, picking up litter and stuff like that. Well, that's where we'll save some money. But basically, this country wants law and order. And I'll tell you the other thing we should do in the police. We should make the police service a police force again, and we should respect the office of constable. And can we just get rid of all the diversity officers? And whilst we're at it...
Well, no, hang on. Hang on. Sorry, so I'm going to stop
That's more controversial than what I said.
Stop.
Really.
Sorry, excuse me.
Not normal.
Getting rid of all the diversity officers, as in, you mean people in the offices who deal with diversity and inclusion, not the diversity of officers, so lots of actually looking
No, of course, the police force should reflect...
What do you mean by diversity officers?
All these nonsense courses they go on, which infest every public organisation, including the police and including the National Health Service. Listen, front line, that's where you put the money. If somebody in the police has got a problem, if somebody is a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, you root them out. But most coppers aren't.
Some of these courses aren't really worth the paper they're written on, to be honest.
That's what I'm trying to say to you.
So if you're talking about courses, then yes, absolutely.
You know, and
but you keep the diversity, obviously, of the police.
Of the officers.
But you would do that by enabling your police officers to be within the community, because people of all races and creeds and colours will have more respect for the police because they're actually communicating with them.
We need to stop them having rainbow laces and taking the knee for BLM. That's what we need.
Well, that's a whole separate issue. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't agree with taking the knee at all. This show is nothing without you. There's no point just bending down on a knee thinking you're going to help racism in that way. No, get off your knees, get on your feet and do something about it, is what I say. But as ever, the show is nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics that we're discussing. Reverend James Treasure is the resourcing church lead at Top Church in Dudley in West Midlands. Reverend, do you think that we need more local police stations?
Definitely. I think this lady, Alison, has got a finger on the pulse. I think it's a terrific idea. The more local police that we can have engaging with local people, the safer we feel. But also, I think we can't deny that there's such a lack of trust in the police at the moment, and it's just spiralling more and more and more. And for quite clear reasons, we can think of quite a handful, can't we? Quite easy. But I think if we have local police stations, we have local police people walking the streets, engaging with their community. I just think that the trust will be rebuilt in our communities. And, you know, where I live in Dudley, we've got a local police station just round the corner. Admittedly, there's no sign on it, I think, but we know it's there. And we've had some challenges and difficulties in our local community, and the police knocked on the door and we had a chat about certain characters and things going on. And it is just so reassuring when the police are present, involved, and walking the beat. And it does reduce crime, but even if it doesn't, it's about investing in community and relationships. So I think what this lady Alison's done is fantastic, and well, I hope more people follow her example.
Reverend James Treasure, thank you very much for joining us. That's Reverend James Treasure. He's a great British voice. He's there at the resourcing church lead for Top Church in Dudley. You see, you could be a great British voice as well. Get in touch with us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We love to hear your thoughts. So today we're asking, should we reintroduce local police stations to tackle crime? So let's have a quick chat with the panel very briefly. What he said was quite good, wasn't it?
We should have more reverends like him on the beat.
Yes, we should.
And the reality is, fundamentally, people feel psychologically good if they know there are local police stations. And leaving aside the statistics, it's psychological. If you know there's a police station near you, you're less likely to commit a crime.
Well, as the Reverend said, actually, their little one, they've been hiding in a little room with it, which isn't labelled police, but fair enough.
But they all know it's there.
They know it's there. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Zach says local police on foot to build relations with the community and build intelligence on who is doing what. Putting a human face to policing would help greatly. Forget local police stations. Use the money to fund more police locally. Yeah, but where would they go? I mean, you know, we don't want them all sitting in the McDonald's or wherever it is they're going to go, or the donut shop. Derek says it would be great to see some rural policing. These areas are neglected. Catherine says, absolutely local Bobby on the beat. Was awesome back in the day. No cars, just a push bike, and knew everyone locally. Graham says, what ruined policing was computers. Too much police time now spent in stations, inputting data, catching up with emails and online training, etc., etc. Some of that diversity training as well that John mentioned. Turn the clock back 35 years to proper hands-on policing. I think some of them don't really want to come out of the police station or where it is. I don't blame them, though. Well, listen, keep your thoughts coming. We love hearing your views. But we move on because despite the government's announcement to stop wearing face coverings and face masks in classrooms, some secondary schools in England say they'll still encourage students to wear face masks indoors whilst the Omicron variant is spreading. Well, earlier this week here on GB News, political commentator Sophie Cochrane spoke passionately about the impact coronavirus has had on her life and other young people across the UK.
It literally ruined our lives. And nobody spoke about it at all. And the commentators, they had union reps come on and say this is what the school should have put in place, and they didn't care about what this did to us. And this is the first time I've ever spoken about it on TV because I knew that I'd cry about it, but I literally watched and felt like my entire life was falling apart because of what this government did to young people, and nobody cares. Not one person has cared about children in this pandemic. They think, oh, let's throw... Why are we putting masks on them when people can go to football stadiums and they can go to theatres and play Nadeem Zahawi sitting there at the teaching awards with no mask, and yet we're disrespecting kids? This pandemic will finish. The damage this has done for us is forever, and we'll never get it back.
So, I mean, Sophie, it joins me now. Sophie, how does it feel watching yourself back there?
I mean, I'm embarrassed. I don't think I've ever cried on camera before, but some things just need to be said and some things just need to be said in a real way. And, you know, it's not easy to watch, but what we've dealt with wasn't easy to go through either. And we have the likes of Sky News, they're really winding me up this week. They did a video, I think it was yesterday, I don't know, my body clock's all over the place, and they come up with, and they were wearing face masks, and they went, and they meticulously chose kids in schools that were like, we love face masks, it's great for us. And they did that when they cancelled my exams as well. They got union reps on the TV to tell us how great it was for us. It wasn't great for us. And they're speaking for us, and they're meticulously choosing an agenda that they want to feel, and they're ignoring how we've felt the entire pandemic. So it just had to be said, and I don't apologise for saying it.
Well, one of the things you said was that you used to just take the masks off as well at school.
Yeah,
my daughter, she's at school, she's 13, she says, well, we do, then we'll just take them off.
We just took them off. When we was in lessons, we couldn't hear each other. I mean, the one thing that's really irritating me, and I'm going to be honest with you, Those people that say it's just a mask, you are some of the most grotesquely ignorant people in this country. Because let me tell you this, for those deaf kids that are hard of hearing, it's not just a mask. For those shy kids at the back of the classroom who don't want to speak and, you know, don't put their hands up, it's not just a mask. For those kids who maybe have different accents and are from different backgrounds, or those teachers that have different accents and are from different backgrounds, again, it's not just a mask because it hurts your communication. And those people that are saying it is, they are just so unbelievably grotesquely ignorant, and a lot of those people are the ones who are in our school systems and in those unions. And those people in those unions have been utterly disgusting towards children. They painted us as criminals. They said we were super spreaders, we were dangerous. They bullied us, they harassed us. They said we were killing grandma just because we wanted to go to school. I mean, how dare you? How dare you say that? And these are the people that, again, are making this legislation above what the government is saying to keep face masks in schools. And what that does is create a postcode lottery for children, whereas some kids are going to get a decent education because they're mask-free and they're able to access their education as normal, as they deserve, and others aren't.
Well, but some people might, and I obviously respect your view because I can see that you're passionate about it and it obviously has affected you directly.
Yeah.
But what would you say to people who say, well, you know, sort of, and I'm not going to use the phrase man up as a sort of, you know, but let's use it for now just to, you know, if they were saying to you sort of, you know, get your head together, sort it out. I mean, children your age went through war and this and that. It is just, in a sense, just a mask. But, you know, doctors, surgeons wear masks for 8 hours and...
Right,
know,
but
what would you...
Comparable.
Well, but this is, you know, and you said it's just a mask, but some people might view that as well as, you know, they're saying, come on, you're young, you know, you can get over this. It's only a few years of your life. It's not really a real sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, only the few years of our life that are going to set up all of the other years of our life. I mean, if you were not there, you do not know. And those people that come out and the people that are put on TV, they're put there for a reason. They're put there to spread a particular message, and the message they're sending isn't what we're feeling. And that is why I had to speak out after so long, because I was getting tired, and this is the reason why I got into politics, because I just felt so completely and utterly hopeless at the time that I thought, why is no one saying anything? So eventually I think we're going to have to start putting it up and saying it.
Why do you think that some of these schools are keeping these masks? Because now it's time to take them off. I'm glad they're taking them off, you know. I accepted that there was a time when they may have been useful. Omicron doesn't appear to be a variant that is really that deadly, and most people are getting over it quite nicely, which means it could be actually quite useful. No need really to isolate if you haven't got the symptoms anymore. This is not, doesn't seem to me, why are they keeping the mask? Why are they holding on to that piece of
Because they're infested with getting their political messages across. It's what teaching unions do.
What would that be? Why would they want you to wear a mask? What's the benefit?
Because it's anti-government. The government are removing masks, and as soon as they do something, the NEU have to go against it. They're not interested in their workers. Don't tell me they're interested in their workers, because when one of their workers was getting threatened in Baitley, they weren't there. All they want to do is cause trouble with this government, whether that comes to the expense of people like me or not.
Do you think that's...
I think it's time that somebody does what Thatcher started and we get rid of them.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that is another conversation for sure. I mean, that could be a way of looking at it. So, what would you say then to those students in those schools that are insisting people are wearing these masks? Yet it's not actually any government legislation at all. It's not part of a uniform. How can they mandate or make that happen?
It's in 3 words: do not comply. That's it.
Do not comply. Kids shouldn't be bothering with it at all. Just don't go in.
Take them off.
Because see, as a parent, my daughter went into school and she goes, oh, she actually came down and she said, oh, I've forgotten my mask. I've forgotten my mask. I mean, guys, what do you think of this? Because it's not a law anymore. Care homes are doing the same thing, actually. Care homes, they've been told, oh, it's fine, you can do visiting for longer than these periods and so on and so forth, and they're just making it up as they go along.
I get it. I agree with you. I think that the shy point is really interesting, because I had a really good friend at school who just ended up being excluded for 3 or 4 months, and he ended up that way for, as far as I know, his life up to his 50s because of that time. The second thing is, in terms of health, for goodness sake, we all know
there's no evidence that it works. If the government have stopped it, what different evidence do the teaching unions have? That is my question. What evidence do they have that the government do not?
And also, in any case...
What evidence do they have?
Well, in any case, Omicron doesn't appear to be that deadly. I know people who are very old who caught it.
This is a political decision, not a health-motivated decision, and that is clear as day can be.
Yeah, I totally agree.
John, do you have anything to add?
Well, I largely disagree with what she had to say.
I think that's exactly
because
right.
it's called a debate. I think that there was a time when masks definitely had to be worn. That was the definite view. Are you saying that they should never have had masks in schools, Sophie?
I don't think that's what Sophie
Yeah, I'm saying that, yeah. Because
never. Okay.
There's no scientific evidence to prove that they work.
Well, that's not true
and
either,
the
is it?
realistic
There
thing
is
is...
plenty... That's not true.
Yes, there's evidence that masks work in a scientific environment, but schools aren't scientific environments, and the masks that we had access to were not medical-grade face masks. They were a bit of cloth that your nan sewed up.
Well, also, actually, aside that, it's not even government legislation. So if they don't have to be doing it, they don't need to be doing it. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. It's really good to talk to you, and thank you so much because I saw that and I thought I must talk to you about that because I appreciate you coming to join us and talk to that.
Thank
Sophie
you.
Cochrane, she's coming to talk to us about face masks in schools, which are no longer legislation. So it's interesting that some schools are still doing it. But now it's time for our quickfire debates. It's the part of the show where we look at some of the day's other stories. And I've got my trusted buzzer. You didn't see it. You can hear it. You can hear it. And when I press that, it means silence from the panel. They need to keep their mouths shut. So let's go on to our first... Well, actually, you're the one that's talking, so be quiet. But on to our first story. And I think you'll like this one if you hate driving. A woman from London who's been scared of roundabouts. She drove all the way to Scotland's west coast to do one of the UK's easiest driving tests, despite making a 500-mile journey to do it. She went 500 miles. She must have come across a roundabout in the Isle of Mull, which is an extremely high pass rate and only one roundabout. She sadly failed. So I'm joined by former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and also writer and commentator John Gaunt. How many times, John, did it take you to pass your test?
Well, she better not move to Milton Keynes because there's roundabouts everywhere. It took me twice.
Twice?
Had the same examiner both times. It was a trans woman. First time I failed for not going fast enough, not making due progress. Second time, same woman in the car. I thought, oh, here we go again. Got to the end of the test and she said, that was worse than the first time. But I couldn't bear doing the test with you again. Pass. True story.
Lembit.
I passed first time. I also got a motorbike licence. And I nearly crashed into the examiner on my motorbike test for the emergency stop, but he passed me.
But still passed you. You see, that's the thing. The worst drivers pass first time. I passed.
What about you?
I passed second time. I passed second time. My sister passed first time, and then she borrowed my dad's car, legally, of course, and then went through some cameras and the traffic lights, and then got 3 points on a licence.
TMI.
Right, let's have a look. Right, the days of getting your money out of the hole in the wall could soon be over. That's because cash machines could be rolled back as less people are actually withdrawing cash and instead spending on their cards or maybe even using some of that Bitcoin. I don't understand it. Customers withdrew £3 billion worth less cash, from machines in the UK last year compared to 2020. So, Lembit and John, do you withdraw much cash?
Almost never. For me...
Because you haven't got any.
It's because he never buys around.
John, your turn. You're next.
I hardly ever go to the cash point anymore. And do you remember when you used to say in shops, minimum spend on a card, £10?
Oh, yes.
All of that's gone because of COVID. I quite like the fact it's all on the card. Taxman likes it as well because you can prove what you spent. I'm
Police
not that bothered about
they'll
cash.
know everything about you, John.
Oh.
We'll know everything about you,
Oh,
John.
yeah.
How rich you are.
Well, let's have a look. Next, thank you very much. Right, £100 million of taxpayers' cash is actually being ploughed into making a gigafactory in Northumberland, which will manufacture power cells for electric cars. The British Volt project intends to manufacture batteries for 300,000 electric cars each year. Lembit and John, is this a good way to spend the taxpayers' money? I'll start quickly with you, John. Be quick, because Lembit...
Yes, they're going to have to do it, aren't they, basically? And they're doing it in Coventry as well. And it's more high-tech jobs.
Lembit.
Nonsense. Bad for the environment, and I can prove it.
You can prove it in what way?
Because basically, when you look at the life cycle of an electric car, unless you do a ridiculous number of miles, which you probably can't do before the batteries get useless, it actually arguably increases the footprint of the car, and I've got the evidence to show it.
He's got the evidence to show it.
I've got the evidence.
I can't wait for that. Right.
Yeah, well, OK, I kept within your time.
I'm slightly joking, Lembit. I'm not really waiting for the evidence of that. But I actually agree with you in terms of those batteries and those electric cars. I don't want one yet. Although there is a Mercedes that can do 600 miles on one charge.
Initially, but what about an 8-year-old Mercedes? What's it going to be worth?
I wonder how expensive it's going to be as well to charge it with these days' electric prices. Right, so on today's show, we've been asking, would you vote for Keir Starmer? According to our Twitter poll, guess what? It's gone up. 91% of you say no way, you say. Well, I've got to say thank you so much to my fabulous panel, writer and commentator John Gaunt and former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opek. They joined me. It's been fun. And thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back tomorrow at 4, but coming up next, it's Dubes & Co. Let's get another weather update. Enjoy.
Hello again. It's been a dry week for most of us, and that continues into the weekend. Often, though, it's going to be quite grey outside this weekend with a lot of cloud around. A few places we'll continue to see a bit of blue sky, but high pressure is dominating across the UK. This one's been ambling in from the west over the past couple of days and bringing with it across the west today quite a lot of cloud, and that cloud is going to become more extensive overnight. If heading out this evening, it's going to be dry, but most won't be as cold as last night. However, across parts of eastern England and at times in the south, we will still have clear skies, and that will allow temperatures perhaps to drop down close to freezing. But for most, that cloud acting like a blanket, keeping the temperatures higher than last night. The thickest cloud in the northwest, and there will be some patchy rain over the Highlands and the Western Isles. But here it will be a pretty mild start to Saturday, 6 or 7 Celsius. There will be some rain just trickling in across the Highlands through tomorrow, perhaps as far south as Argyll and Bute. A spot of drizzle possible over the hills in northwest England, but for most it's dry. But it is going to be mostly cloudy. Eastern England, parts of the south, northeast Scotland favour for some breaks in the cloud. And if we see some sunshine in the far northeast, 11, 12 degrees is possible. Generally 8 or 9 top temperature, so a little milder than today. During Saturday evening, again, where we've got a few breaks in the cloud, there could be some pockets of frost, but most will just stay dry and cloudy, and that will keep the temperatures up. We'll keep a brisk breeze blowing throughout the weekend across the northwest. If anything, it's going to strengthen further during Sunday. But again, apart from a bit of drizzle here and there, most places will be dry. And again, a few breaks likely in the cloud, so could see some sunny spells during Sunday, but for most, just expect dry and cloudy. And temperatures, again, generally 6, 7, maybe 8 degrees Celsius. Top temperature probably in the northwest with a brisk breeze here, 10 or 11 Celsius. High pressure promising to keep things dry for most of us well into next week.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to